concerned about the second P, the parameters, because when you talk about resources, we see now that both public and private higher education institutions have been hit very, very badly. I mean, some universities talk of over $50 million loss in revenue. It seems that the large endowments of even the Ivy League universities are not enough to weather the storm. And somehow the situation is similar both for private and public universities. Dimberger, would you like to ask a question to Gerardo or to President Cervantes?
Yeah, please. So Gerardo, I'll put you on the spot. No, but I'd be interested, given some of the work that you've been doing, when we really think about some of the issues that I addressed what do you see as the fastest ways forward to take advantage, right, of the current situation and to make sure that we're providing equitable learning opportunities as opposed to going to sort of the path of least resistance towards more resources, right? So in a limited resource, how do we make sure that we're going to forward in a way that most addresses equity?
And that's a great question, right? And I think it's one that invites us to think about, or it reminds us once again that equity is not equality, right? And even though we all are being affected as individuals, we all are being affected as institutions, in fact, this crisis is having some very paradoxical implications, right? And I think the UMass Boston example is really, really good about strength and resilience, right? Because when we think about identifying the damage, when you look at a university that is by and large accessible in cost, that serves the community that is nearby, UMass Boston is in a much better position than some of the traditionally elite institutions, right? So I think the question of parameters is fundamental, no doubt, but I also think because we've been using lately this analogy of having the world upside down. Well, that's actually not a bad thing for those groups in society that usually are at the bottom, right? So I think these are some opportunities that we need to identify, whereas some of the more tuition-dependent, highly selective institutions or moderately selective, those are the ones that are more at risk at the moment, right? Of course, the most elite will always be protected by those systems and structures, but I think here there is a good opportunity for institutions that are already doing good work, right, to capitalize on this situation and continue forward. And I think, not surprising, the first principle or the first P that was laid out was precisely this of principles, because I think if we get that right, we can figure out the rest. I also wanted to, in this way forward, and maybe I'm posing the next question, right? Because I really don't have the answer, and I've been grappling with these. But I think the issue of faculty participation is important. And here I'll say why this is a dilemma. On the one hand, of course, as a mission-driven enterprise, we want to have faculty input. So I'll offer the question both to President Cervantes and Dimberger, right? But so here's the balance, right? That I think is very difficult to achieve. On the one hand, faculty, we don't usually like to have decisions imposed on us. On the other hand, the day-to-day reality of faculty is that we are supporting our students, we are keeping track, right, and keeping up with our scholarly output. We had to transition to distance learning, and many of our colleagues, right, are also supporting their families, raising children, so their ability to participate in the traditional shared governance structures are very limited, right? Because, and I know this just from coordinating a small program, people don't want to go to another meeting, but at the same time, they need to be comfortable with the decision making. So I guess that's my next question, right? If we, assuming that we are currently in this crisis problem solving situation, how can we go about making these decisions in a way that is inclusive, but that is not taxing? And I would be open to any thoughts and ideas from either of my colleagues in the panel.
And that's a very good perspective from a dean and from the president of a university.
Okay. I should say that we don't have that problem at the university right now. But thinking about UNAM, where teachers are very comfortable doing what they have been doing for the last 25 or 30 years, how do we convince those teachers to change? I think it is a very difficult task. I remember a colleague of mine from one university in Florida that they did this study 10 years ago. And the conclusion was, well, we should wait until they retire or die. So many teachers will never participate in changing the way they teach. The second conclusion was we must work with the new teachers. So we have to hire new teachers every year, so we should work with them so they will lead this transition. I found at UNAM in the philosophical and the faculty of philosophy that teachers who were like 70 years old or very close to that, they change very well. They really enjoyed working with students in the distance education modality. So we have to work with the teachers that want to really participate in the first place. I think their example will motivate other teachers to do the same. So we have to choose the champions we have at the university, and also if they have this academic respect from the other faculty, that will be the better. I should say it's a very difficult task, but needs to be done. Okay, we don't have the choice of not doing that. Then the other part, as you mentioned, I think I agree with Joseph and the 6 P's, but we need 1F, which is the financing part. Public universities in Mexico are having as much problems as the private universities. Our government is reducing the budgets for education. I have a very good collaboration with people at the Ministry of Public Education, and the area responsible for providing the infrastructure to the teachers in order for them to be able to work with students in the distance modality or by using the television approach, their budget was reduced 50% in the last month. So they have been asked to do much more with half the budget. So what we have been doing from the universities, and I should say public and private universities, is collaborating with them offering some resources, some contents, digital contents, and some courses for the teachers' formation in the modality for free. That's really a great effort from the higher education institutions in Mexico. Also, the economical possibilities of families to pay the fees and the tuitions for their children in private universities is also being reduced a lot. So the number of students going to private universities will decrease, I would say, a great deal because of this pandemic situation. So I think the financing part will become a very important issue in order to do all the other piece that Joseph mentioned. So, but again, I think one way of diminishing these problems is the collaboration among the institutions, public and private.
Very good. And De Berger, from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I agree. This is, one of the great challenges we have. Higher education institutions, by their nature, are traditional and difficult to change. And faculty members who have invested, right, a lot of their time and effort to develop particular expertise and approaches, it's actually understandable why, given particularly the most productive faculty members are going to be the busiest and going to have the least amount of bandwidth and time to be able to retool in terms of new approaches and new skills. On the other hand, it's always true, and Gerardo knows this from working with me for a long time, that the most important decisions we have to make always involve trade-offs. It's not as if there is just the one perfect way to do it. And so we want to be as purposeful as possible about what trade-offs we're willing to live with. And in times of crisis like right now, that is greatly exacerbated. And so I think there's a couple key trade-offs that we need to think about here. One, from a faculty perspective, given the very threats in some ways to our existence right now in higher education, given all of the deleterious effects of the pandemic and all of the loss of resources, not just for the institutions, but it's really for all the families who typically invest in sending the young people and others to the university, and that if we don't make some changes, we're not going to be able to survive, never mind thrive. And so we're going to have to take some collective ownership. The other trade-off from an administrative perspective is, how do we respond rapidly in ways that are attentive to the very real immediate pressures that we have no choice but to face, but also how do we make sure that we're still engaging in inclusive and collaborative shared governance in doing so? And I think that that's where, to be really clear at the front end about the things we were discussing before, if we're clear about what are the principles so that everybody who's engaged in these important decisions understands what it is we value up front. But that's also why it's so important to talk about the parameters, to be clear about what are the resource bases, what is the available infrastructure, and then to put this process that I was talking about in place, where there are opportunities and that you built some trust, right, by being transparent about the principles and the parameters that we all have voices in this. And it's also going to be true that not everybody's going to participate equally. But if communication channels are clear, then there's better trust that some colleagues can engage in more of the heavy lifting when it comes to making the these types of changes. But it's very hard work and it's a big challenge. And I agree, it's something that we are going to have to put really extra effort and commitment. It's just not business as usual. And let me stop there and say hello to Chancellor Newman, who has just joined us.
I'm so sorry that I'm so late. I was on a call with the mayor and all the other university leaders in Boston. And these meetings are really very important, so I couldn't skip it. So I apologize for missing so much of the conversation.
Not at all. Welcome, Chancellor Newman. And well, this is part of the informal conversations, tertulias between UNAM and universities in Mexico and universities in Boston. And we've been talking about the future of higher education and distance education and how it's really so similar in many ways to face-to-face education. And one of the recurring themes has been, first of all, the principles involved in creating this new future, the challenges that we'll have in infrastructure and resources, but also the incredible opportunities for partnerships and partnerships that will be focused on the difference between equality and equity and how we can acknowledge the knowledge of scholars that go beyond the traditional Ivy Leagues or the North, and how we can include in this future of education the knowledge of people from other latitudes. So right now you're in the middle of leading UMass Boston that our friend Gerardo Blanco from Boston College thinks is in a great place because of the commitment to the community, and a much better place than some of the selective or highly selective universities, and about to lead the UMass at large programs on distance education. So your views are incredibly important. By the way, our other two guests, Dr. Blanco and President Cervantes, are both alums of UMass Amherst.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, maybe I could just contribute a little bit to this conversation. And again, I hope I don't repeat anything that I just from having missed the whole first 45 minutes. But, you know, just before the COVID crisis hit, I had the opportunity to visit Mexico, to visit UNAM and a number of other institutions in Mexico. And it was a very, very exciting visit for me. Not only do I love the country and had a wonderful opportunity to see it once again, but it opened my eyes to the enormous variety of opportunities, as you said, for collaboration going forward. And honestly, I hadn't really thought very much about the role of distance education in that collaboration. I'm thinking much more about it now, but I was thinking about it even as I toured the Mexican universities that I had a chance to visit, because it became clear to me that there were all kinds of possibilities for joint degree programs, for 4+1 programs, for exchanges of all kinds. There are some tremendous opportunities that I encountered in Puebla, for example, that would be tremendously helpful for our students who are interested in various kinds of clinical education, because, for example, as you know, in Mexico, medical school is an undergraduate program, and that opens up opportunities there that are really restricted to our students can't access when they are undergraduates, but would be hugely beneficial if they could link up with universities in Mexico. Similarly, there was a great deal of interest among the students that I met, as well as faculty in Mexico, in what we call 4+1 programs. So programs that combine an undergraduate degree in your own institutions with master's degrees in our institutions, where students begin the master's program in their last year of undergraduate and get and sort of truncate the time then and make it more affordable. On the UMass Boston campus, we have been working with a company called Shorelight to develop these kinds of programs with live synchronous delivery that can be two-way. I mean, in fact, it is two-way. It's extremely interactive. And Mexico is very high on my radar screen now as a place where I think there's tremendous opportunity. So as I transition from my role as chancellor of the Boston campus to my new role as system chancellor for academic programs, international is a big, big piece of that portfolio. And it's a big piece of what excited me about the opportunity, because I really look forward to working with all of you in seeing what we can do to recreate, to create for the first time, a truly international form of distance learning with new technologies that make it much more robust, that walk around some of the limitations of the original online versions, which were not very participatory. Just by nature, they couldn't be. But these new technologies are highly participatory and very high fidelity. So I'm talking actually with several different firms about this, and not only in terms of academic education of the kind UMass Boston is interested in, but I will be responsible for a whole different form of education that you might think of as sort of adult-oriented vocational education aimed at enabling people, both in the US and elsewhere in the world, to come closer to realizing their occupational dreams. So that's probably not something UMass Boston or even any of the main undergraduate campuses in our system would be interested in, but UMass Global, that will be one of its most important responsibilities. So let me stop there and just use that as a down payment.
Excellent. Well, I'm certain that everybody in this panel would be very interested in continuing the conversation, particularly, of course, President Cervantes, who leads a distance, mostly distance education university in Mexico. But I would like now to invite our two guests, Brittany and Vanya, and let's start with Brittany to ask some questions to the panel. I mean, as you know, she's in charge of international programs at UMass Boston, and she has visited Mexico, and I think you had a good time, Brittany. So would you like to ask a question to the panel or to anyone in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, I am the study abroad coordinator at UMass Boston. So this semester has been really hard for a lot of those students who were abroad and got called home. And I've really been thinking about sort of the loss of opportunity, this summer and potentially this fall for a lot of students who really wanted to get that international experience on their resume. As a master's degree student at UMass Boston, also in international relations, I think it's really vital to still be able to get that international experience on your resume. So I kind of wanted just to put it out there to anyone on the panel of what do you really envision to get that international experience inside the classroom. I know that UNAM has worked on this somewhat, so I kind of wanted to just throw it out there and see if you had any ideas on how to continue this international experience, even if we can't go abroad necessarily.
Well, Brittany, one thing that I think would be wonderful if our colleagues at UNAM were interested was some kind of collaborative set of seminars that could be jointly hosted and where students on both ends could participate. And even if those were not sort of formal classes that were, semester long or something, all of us are feeling this isolation. All of us know that international travel in particular is going to be highly constrained in the fall. But that should not stop us from using these technologies we have at our fingertips, especially if there are faculty members that have cognate interests. Joe, maybe you could comment on that from a dean's perspective as to whether that's feasible.
Absolutely, that's feasible. And I think that as you say, there's a real thirst right now for connection. Well, obviously, having the total of experience of getting to travel elsewhere and to immerse yourself in another culture is ideal. At the core, at the heart of it is, how do we provide opportunities for people from different cultures, from different perspectives to engage with each other? And I think even informal opportunities, and matter of fact, we might facilitate more engagement. We thought of shorter, more episodic ways to make those connections, as opposed to somebody having to sign up for something that has to be a whole semester in duration. And this could even be a chance to pilot some ways, again, thinking about face-to-face and online not as fundamentally different things, but as part of a broader spectrum, that how we could start creating ways to strengthen when we do get back to go to traveling abroad, the opportunities to get to know people before we even arrive, or to supplement shorter trips abroad that are more cost effective, particularly for those students who can't afford to go somewhere for a longer period of time. So we could start doing some experiments, right, with how to better connect with each other during this time, that then could be jumping off points for further opportunities to mix and match different types of experiences in the future.
Really welcome this opportunity. And I should say, I've always felt that our language classes should be conducted with, if not mandatory, then at least the opportunity for conversational Spanish or conversational any language using Zoom, because our students would get something close to an immersion environment. Sorry, I think I interrupted.
Hello, Catherine. I think we met at UMass Boston when you signed the collaboration agreement with UNAM. And we could really do what Brittany is asking for if we identify courses, common courses, and we run a pilot, as Joseph mentioned, with students from different countries, from students from UMass Boston, students from UNAM, students from UNIR, from Mexico, from Spain, from Colombia, and really organize a very international group. So they will get this international experience by interacting with students from all over the countries we work with, and also with professors from different nationalities. So probably having one professor from the English-speaking country, the States, and one professor from the Spanish-speaking country. So we can create really the environment for this international experience with no problem. So we identify the courses, and we see that UNAM or UNIR or UMass or Boston College have the same courses. We can really enroll students from all our universities so they work together. And also they can develop projects, international projects that involve the knowledge of how things are done in Spain, how things are done in Mexico, or how things are done in the States. And in that way, I think these students that Brittany was talking about will really experience this international approach for education. And that won't be very difficult to accomplish. We have developed schemes of what we call virtual mobility. So we have the physical mobility where one student from UNAM goes one semester to UMass, or one student from UMass comes to Mexico for one semester. But we also have this virtual mobility, so students can work with students from other countries, with professors from other countries without physical mobility. So I think in that way, what Brittany is asking us could be very easy to implement.
Thank you so much, President Cervantes. And now I would like to ask Vania or Raquel if they want have one last question for our panelists.
Yes, thank you all the panelists. It was very interesting. I think that one of the main concerns in all the pandemic are, as you were saying, the polarization and the inequities. As this regard, I was thinking how to close the gap in distance education. And I'm certain there's a lot of ways and a lot of strategies, but especially I was thinking about three, and I hope you could make some comments about them. The first of all is that education is not only like making lessons and answering quizzes. It's about a social experience. So how can we close the gap with those students that are just on the screen and make it more like bring them opportunities, like also attending the library, also going to concerts, and most importantly, how to create groups and their networks. And then number two, the beginning of the tertulia, you were talking about key pedagogic strategies, because at the end, the technology is just a tool. A boring class will be the same face-to-face and in distance education. So which do you think will be those key pedagogic strategies? And finally, I don't know in the rest of the world, but at least in my faculty, usually the open system and the distance system students feel like they are like the ugly duckling of the university. They are really worried, like, will my diploma say that I belong to distance education? Will my diploma say that I come from open? Will it be just the same as the schooling system? And I have been teaching also in open and system education, and they are actually hard workers. They're actually very well organized because they're not only students. They're usually, they belong to a family, they have jobs. And I always tell them that they're actually like example for the rest of the community. So those are my three issues that I would like to discuss with you. Thank you.
Very good. I mean, perhaps you can share the answers. Why don't we start with Chancellor Newman?
So I actually think that one of the silver linings of this whole pandemic crisis is that it has been, to some degree, a leveler. That is, it has reduced some of the inequities just by forcing isolation on all of us. But it has also exposed some dramatic inequalities, even within our country, which we've had to cope with, having to do with access to technology, access to safe space, the ability of our students to be able to study if they are now living in settings that are not very conducive to study. And those are very glaring inequalities that have become very clear to us. They are a little harder for us to do very much about. We have, for example, we conducted a major fundraising campaign to provide Chromebooks, which are inexpensive computers. And we did. We raised funding for several hundred of those to go to our most needy students. I'm sure that's just a drop in the bucket, and I would in no way want to suggest that this has been some kind of massive leveling experience. But I think it has exposed more people to remote and online education than ever had before, certainly faculty, but students as well. And once you've got the technology sorted, it is something that people can participate in from many different corners of the world. And so I think there is an appreciation and recognition of what this technology's possibilities are, but we are at the very beginnings of exploring that and under duress, which is not the best way to learn about anything, really. And so I have great respect for the faculty that I work with for having made this transition in record time with no warning, and doing so with tremendous grace. I'm sure, I know it's not a perfect experience, but it has, I think it opened their eyes to the complexities of trying to deliver quality education under these circumstances. And sadly, because pandemics don't disappear overnight, I think this is knowledge we're going to have to make use of for quite some time. I am not among those who thinks that it will be an easy matter to come back on ground. In fact, I think for the UMass Boston population, that's going to be exceptionally difficult, because we have so many students who come from the communities that have been impacted to the greatest degree. So I think there are, going forward, lots of opportunities of the kind we were just talking about a moment ago to create these linkages and to open them up to students who would not have had the opportunity to travel abroad. If that was an outcome, that would be a silver lining.
Very good. Thank you so much, Chancellor Newman. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. We finish our tertulias with a toast, something positive about the future. So, if you have a cup of coffee or an imaginary glass, I would like, again, why don't you
A
start,
bottle of Perrier.
Chancellor Newman, by sharing with us a toast about the future of higher education?
Cheers. Thank you so much for organizing this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for letting me join you so late.
Salud.
Salud.
And Chancellor Newman, President Cervantes, Dean Berger, Professor Blanco, Brittany, Tanya, and Raquel, thank you so much for joining. And salud. There is a bright
Salud.
future with people like you at the helm of the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Muchas
very much.